It's time for Focus Features, our new Thursday night program that takes the form of a current affairs documentary. Tonight we scrutinise a new plan to put Gauteng on the tourist map. So if you think that Gauteng has nothing more to offer than an ugly urban sprawl, keep watching.
Tourism is the fastest growing industry in the world, and most tourists to Africa want to see the Big Five. Here in South Africa, there are many more than willing to offer the free-spending tourist a wildlife experience. The more the rand continues on its downward slide, the more eager South Africans are to earn themselves some dollars and pounds. The exchange rate is just too good to be true. Thousands of cattle farms are being turned over to game, and game lodges are springing up all over the country. Gauteng, however, is one province that can't offer the tourist much of a wildlife experience. Even though Johannesburg is the main gateway to the rest of Southern Africa, it is not a favoured tourist destination. If tourists ever spend any time in Johannesburg, it's of very short duration. A day, 3 days at the most, for those who are combining their holiday with a little bit of business. All those lovely tourist dollars and pounds are just not finding their way into Gauteng's coffers. And so, Gauteng has now decided that it too wants a Big Five game reserve.
The issue of the Big Five type of a game reserve for Gauteng is but one of the most important aspects of contributing towards the economic growth of our province and that of our country. We are a highly urbanized area. However, we can also promote nature in this province. There are those potentials.
Unknown to many are thousands of hectares of bushveld just north of Pretoria. And it is here that Gauteng wants to establish a Big Five game reserve, which will give the rest of the country's wildlife areas a run for their money. 250,000 hectares, a quarter of the size of Kruger, right on the doorstep of South Africa's major metropolitan area.
That is one of the main selling features of this project, making it so viable. The fact is that it's in such a close proximity to such a large metropolitan area. Nowhere in the world, I think, you will have a concept like this. We're so close to thousands and millions of people staying in close proximity in a concrete jungle that you can drive in half an hour away and be enveloped by nature where the Big Five is actually accommodated.
But before the Big Five can be reintroduced into the area, the land has to be consolidated. And this is where the problems begin. The area that Gauteng has identified, which could one day be included in the reserve, stretches over 3 provinces. And while some areas fall under the control of state and provincial authorities in all 3 provinces, the rest of the land belongs to more than 2,000 individual landowners, including the Air Force and the Army. Negotiations to include provincial reserves in Northern Province and Mpumalanga are still in their infancy.
The matter is still being discussed. Both the Northern Province and the Gauteng Province need to come together, sit down, discuss, and then pave the way forward. At this stage, there haven't been formal discussion yet. The reserve itself being popular, especially to fishermen, we believe that may as well assist in drawing more tourists to the area. The only future that can generate a lot of income in this province lies in tourism. More tourists will come into the area. Other tourist-related ventures can be established in the area, and that will also sort of empower the local population. In principle, our province is quite in favor of the idea, because we know that after a long run, that will benefit both the Northern Province and Gauteng.
Ja, ek dink tog dit definitief kan dit doen in 'n natuurbewaringsopset. Jou situasie waar ons in die totale Suid-Afrika op die oomblik is 'n klomp klein reservaatjies wat nie regtig as een eenheid kan funksioneer nie. Hoe groter jou reservate is, hoe makliker is dit om bestuur toe te pas hoe meer kan jy werklike veldbestuur as ook wildbestuur toepas. Ons grootste probleem wat ek sien wat vorentoe gaan lê, is omdat dit in 3 verskillende provinsies is. Daai kan baie probleme veroorsaak in die algemene bestuur en ten opsigte van politieke grense waar mens moet verbygaan.
Mpumalanga's Mkumbu and Mdala nature reserves cover nearly 20,000 hectares. And once electrified perimeter fences are in place, elephant, buffalo and rhino will be reintroduced into the area. But will the fences between these reserves and the proposed Gauteng Reserve ever come down?
Die huidige kreerwildtuin lê oor 2 provinsies gestrek. Ons is op die oomblik hulle in daai omgewing besig om ooreenkomste aan te gegaan met Mosambiek. En as ons kyk na die algemene tendens daarvan in natuurbewaring, kan ek nie sien dat dit onoorkombaar is nie.
However, taking down the fences between the various provincial reserves will only be possible once Gauteng's reserve is in place. And a big chunk of the land belongs to the National Defence Force. Here, Air Force and Army training camps are surrounded by land that the Defence Force uses for training, but also manages as wildlife areas. Game capture operations are all in a day's work for some Defence Force personnel.
We've got just over 20,000 hectares of land, and a lot of game also occur on these properties.
1, 2, 3, go! 1, 2, 3, go! Keep going, keep going.
The Defence Force's general policy is, in terms of good neighbourship, that we want to cooperate with environmental projects in our immediate vicinity. In this specific case, we are in a process of talking to the Provincial Department of Nature Conservation to investigate whether it's possible to cooperate, and if so, to what extent.
The training camps themselves could be fenced out of the reserve, just like any other camp in any other reserve. But when training exercises are underway, what about the safety of the trainees? Learning how to dodge bullets may become rather more complicated when one also has to dodge elephants and lions.
I think at this stage it's important that we do not create any expectations. We do what we can, but we don't want to make expectations which might not be able to fulfill later on. So let's keep the discussion open at this stage, and from then on we take it further.
Another chunk of land which Gauteng eventually wants to bring into the reserve is state land earmarked for the resettlement of black farmers. Here, Gauteng's Directorate of Nature Conservation is taking part in the land reform program. About 5,000 people in the area will benefit from the Rista Winter pilot project. The idea here is first to establish black cattle farmers in the area and then to reintroduce game species. Domestic and wildlife stock will then be run side by side in a management partnership between the farmers and nature conservation.
They can continue with the management of their cattle as they normally would as normal cattle farmers, and then we would manage the game over that entire area, and that they would derive an additional income from the proceeds of game sales or hunting packages which we made available for hunter outfitters and so on.
I'm not having a clear vision meaning game farming. The only thing I know I'm having a good information is the cattle farming.
Over the next 5 years, however, the farmers, with the help of nature conservation, will learn the ins and outs of game farming and ecotourism. Then, once more money is being made out of the game rather than the cattle will be phased out. Cattle fences will be taken down and a private game reserve of about 30,000 hectares will be established in the area. The plan is that the farmers will eventually be running their own game and hunting lodges within their own reserve, as well as providing much-needed employment to the wider community.
Roughly, the population here may be more or less 25,000. Most of the people are unemployed, and definitely if we could get any other type of enjoyment or job creation that can lessen this burden that we are facing, would be very much pleased.
There's lodges, they have to be staffed, they have to be built. There's maintenance of the reserve, the fences and the roads, so there's that kind of employment. There's also employment outside producing food for the lodges, which will hopefully be built inside the game area. So there are a whole lot of other peripheral things where people will get peripheral businesses and jobs where people will derive income. And not only just the landowner who owns the game.
Ons moet self daai toekoms bou en daai toekoms maak. Nou ons is verseker van dit, want ons sien al klaar die verskil. Laat ons self kan opbou en opbly en al die dinge doen.
As ons kan hard werk, ons sal miskien beter lewe, ons sal miskien nie baie mense hier so sien wat honger ly.
But nothing is going to happen overnight. Land issues still have to be resolved before the Roodeplaat pilot project can take off. For the unemployed and the hungry, the good life is still quite a long way down the line.
There is a mixed feeling, seeing that there are people who are now impatient, seeing that it has been quite a long time that people have been waiting for the land to be delivered, and the expectancy of people hasn't come that way as they've expected it. The land issue is in itself a long process, and people also do not know what's taking place. If people could persevere and wait until such time when these problems are resolved, finally people will benefit a lot from this area.
We don't expect it to be an easy ride, and we don't expect it to take 5 years. We're looking at 10, 15 years. But if we don't look at different approaches, we're never going to get anything conserved. We're looking at all kinds of models to secure land for conservation, and this is just one of the concepts we've come up with a short-term strategy with a long-term goal in mind.
The long-term goal is, of course, to establish one big private reserve and eventually to link it up with the main Big Five Game Reserve. But crucial to the entire concept of a Big Five Game Reserve is the cooperation of hundreds of landowners in the core area of the proposed Gauteng Reserve. Crucial to the entire concept of a Big Five Game Reserve for Gauteng is the cooperation of hundreds of landowners in the core area of the proposed reserve. Here, farms vary in size from 10 hectares to 3,000 hectares. Although most farm with domestic livestock, a number of farms are already going over to game. Naga Safari Lodge is a case in point. Only 30 minutes drive from the centre of Pretoria, the lodge already caters for day and overnight visitors.
Dit is finansiëel baie meer voordelig as om te boer. Ek sien potensiaal wat ek sien is toerisme in Suid-Afrika. Weet ons is naby in Pretoria, ons is naby Jan Smuts lughawe of die nuwe Johannesburg lughawe. Ons kan baie toeriste hier naartoe loop. Huidiglik boer ek met wild en met beeste, sowel as 'n bietjie skaap. Maar aan die einde van die dag sal ek die beeste en die skape wegmaak, sal die grensdrade laat sak en dan net ingaan vir wild.
And this is precisely the cattle-to-game trend Gauteng Nature Conservation wants to encourage. If all the landowners in the area take off their domestic livestock, fences between the various properties can be removed and a private game reserve can be established, just like the private Timbavati and Plasiri game reserves on the border of the Kruger National Park. The Gauteng Collaborative Reserve will also have a constitution and will also be run by a central committee. But unlike private reserves such as the Timbavati, the Gauteng Reserve will be open to the general public. Those whose land falls within the reserve will get shares in the whole business, the number of shares depending on the amount of land each contributes. Additional shares will also be given to those who already have game on their farms. Each landowner will make his own money out of his own tourism ventures, but at the end of the financial year, each landowner will also receive his share of the whole reserve's profits. These profits will be generated from gate money, safari and hunting packages, and game sales. It is estimated that the reserve could generate more than R1 billion a year.
We are basing our projections on studies that have been done elsewhere in Africa. It's one of our major tasks to convince all the individual landowners, regardless of the type of land use that they are practicing on that piece of property, is that we are offering them something else. We are offering them a natural resource land use practice, which might be able to generate something more than what they are actually doing.
Ek dink dit is 'n baie goeie idee, omdat dit vir die gemeenskap baie kan beteken. Dit is 'n gemeenskap hier wat nie juis in 'n goeie boerderywêreld is nie. En wild kan die beste oplossing wees. Ek dink dit sal beslis 'n werkende natuurreservaat wees. 'n Lewenskragtige natuurreservaat. Ek het geen twyfel daaromtrent nie.
If I give part of my land to the nature conservationists, I'm going to benefit because I'll be able to build some chalets for our tourists. Maybe they'll be needing some place to sleep for the night, you see. Then I can easily get some money from them by paying me for having a place to sleep.
As ons kyk na wat met Tambawati gebeur het in Klaserie, is dit ook grondeienaars wat saamgekom het en hulle heininge verwyder het en een groter natuurreservaat gemaak het. Hier gaan ons dieselfde hê, of ons beoog dieselfde, met al verskil dat ons het hier baie meer grondeienaars as by Tambawati en by Klaserie. En dit maak dit 'n bietjie 'n baie moeiliker projek, maar ek dink tog op die lang duur is ons besig om te wen. Omdat dit 'n voordeel gaan inhou vir die grondeienaar, die voordeel gaan daarin lê dat dit vir hom finansiëel in bate gaan wees. Baie van die mense wat hier woon is ou mense, hulle het kom aftree ook in die gebied en nou kan hulle ekstra inkomste uit hierdie beoogde natuurreservaat genereer.
Others that will also generate more money are the filling stations and the shops which will fall within the reserve. These will eventually serve the tourists, and all the owners will be asked to tone down the signage and in some way blend their establishments into the environment.
We've got a common goal to work for now. Everybody I talk to, and I talk to most of the people every day, are very positive about this whole effort.
Another business which is already gearing up for the influx of tourists is the Argilla pottery.
The factory's been going for almost 20 years now. We're quite excited about having a pottery in the middle of a big 5 game reserve. As far as I know, it's going to be the only pottery that's ever been inside, such a large pottery inside a reserve.
The pottery is already surrounded by an electrified fence, and the 130 people employed here are bussed in and out of the area every day. So nothing much is expected to change, except, of course, the turnover.
At the moment, we have a turnover close to R1 million a month. Once the reserve comes, we're hoping to double that, maybe triple it. We've already got new lines planned for the reserve, so it's there and waiting once the reserve kicks in. If it goes really well, you can employ 200, 300, 400 people. So I think as a whole, the whole reserve is going to have a major effect on job creation in this entire area.
Businesses and jobs in other areas are already being created. Besides the staff required to run the new lodges, the lodges themselves have to be built. Thatch subcontractor Joel Nyati has increased his team to 45 people.
Ons kry baie werk ook hierso om die omgewing. En ek maak daarom goed geld want ek kan bietjie lewe en ook my mense kan ook bietjie lewe.
The project has the potential to create almost 4,000 job opportunities in and around the proposed development area. And here we're looking at the tour guides, the rangers, the catering personnel, as well as the public relation and visitor services type of human resource. And we believe that the immediate communities around there should be the ones then that would be brought into this type of a project.
Not only the mulatto community will benefit from the reserve, there are also thousands of people, most living in squatter conditions, along the national highway to the west of the proposed reserve. Job opportunities within the reserve and spin-off business opportunities on the outskirts could go a long way towards alleviating the poverty in this area. Another community which is hoping to benefit from the reserve is the Manala tribe of the southern Ndebele. One of the tribe's main cultural sites, Chief Salamba's kraal, will fall within the reserve. Chief Salamba lived here with his tribe during the 19th century. The site is today still the focus of tribal ceremonial life.
Die bewaringsaksies wat ons hier mee besig is, vir proklamering binnekort geskied op die versoek van die Manala mense self. Hulle het gevra dat dit nagevors word, dit bewaar moet word en ek dink dat hulle self sal besluit in hoe mate hulle dit in toerisme wil inskakel. Hulle is baie positief. Die plek kan vir hulle erfenisvoordele inhou in 'n toerisme opset in die sin dat hulle kultuur word aan die wêreld vertel. Maar verder ook kan dit vir hulle ekonomiese voordele inhou om die plek te help bestuur, want dit kos hulle geld.
There are plans to develop Chief Salamba's kraal into a cultural and historical stopover point for tourists visiting the reserve. Another site of historical interest, which will fall within the reserve, is the Berlin Mission Station. This could also be developed into a tourist stopover point.
Hierdie ruïnes is die oorblyfsels van die Berlynse sendinggenootskap by Walmanstal se sendingstasie. Nadat hulle hier in die eerste helfte van die 20ste eeu weg is, het dit staatsgrond geword en daar is heelwat onderhandelinge in die verband aan die gang, maar dit lyk of die Gautengse natuurbewaring die grond wil hê. Een van die baie belangrike ontwikkelings tans is die bewustheid van kultuurerfenis en die ontwikkeling van kulturele toerisme.
But while everyone is hoping that Gauteng's proposed collaborative reserve will create a tourist boom in the province, there are some who are not so positive. Just to begin such a venture, the core area must be at least 70,000 hectares.
Daar's te veel eienaars betrokke. Hulle praat van tussen 2000 en 2500 eienaars binne in 'n wildreservaat en dit glo ek pas net nie in.
Hulle het ons 'n konstitusie gestuur waar geskrewe ene waarop hulle gesê het hoe die reservaat gaan werk, maar hulle het nog nie finale reëlings gegee oor hoe die kwotas uitgewerk gaan word en wie toegelaat gaan word aan wat en waar te kan jag nie. So wat dit aanbetref weet ons nog nie regtig hoe dit gaan werk nie.
A lot of the commercial farmers are also worried about their livelihood, and most are adopting a wait-and-see attitude.
The question is, how long will it take these guys to bring the whole reserve into operation and make it work? If nature conservation can prove that it will be worth my while to stop operating completely, I would like to see an immediate financial result. And I'm not so sure that that financial result can be forthcoming immediately.
Private landowners in the northern province who could join up with the private landowners in Gauteng are also adopting a wait-and-see approach.
What guarantee have we got that they're going to make a success of the whole enterprise that they have in mind? There are 2,000 of us in the pudding. Whoever puts the scheme together has got to satisfy the aspiration of 2,000 landowners, and I just don't see it working.
If the income was there from the game side to compensate for the loss of the cattle farming, we could certainly look at it more seriously. But right now I can't see that they can justify that sort of income to me or to us as cattle farmers.
The concept would only be successful if the management is of a high standard. And at this point, we don't know who's going to manage it. The idea is great, it's wonderful. But of course, it has an impact on us as farmers. And we've invested a lot of money here. If we were to become part of the project, there's no doubt about it, we would have to fence off our greenhouses purely because of the investment we put into them. We've got about 1,000 hectares here that is not being used for our intensive rose farming operation. Whether that could become part of the overall project or not would depend very much on what the prospects would be for us.
While some farmers are unsure of the future if they get involved in the project, there are plenty of others who are more positive. But with so many stakeholders involved, is it really feasible?
This is the most worrying thing in my mind, that if you don't get enough people that are positive and go along with it, it could sort of delay it or maybe even scuttle the idea.
The nature and the scope of this project is absolutely staggering. But I don't think we should focus on the problems that it's going to issue, all the issues that are going to cause the problems for us. I think we must be positive in our outlook. We've achieved so much just through a positive attitude. We should look for solutions to make this thing work.
But just how positive can one get? The province is talking about bringing together 2,000 private landowners and commercial farmers, linking them up to state land and provincial reserves, and then bringing in the Roodeplaat pilot project and the Defence Force. If all this can be achieved, Gauteng could one day have a Big Five game reserve. But just how long will it all take? It took a good 10 years to get Pilanesberg off the ground, and today it ranks second after Kruger as South Africa's most favorite national park. But Gauteng's proposed collaborative reserve could be 3 times larger than Pilanesberg, and certainly for millions of South Africans a lot more accessible than Pilanesberg or Kruger. Too ambitious? Who knows?